Okay, give it about 5 seconds.
Okay. Sharon's on yet? Yes, she is.
Okay, we're live.
Welcome, everybody, to the Education Work Session for December 7th, 2022. I want to welcome our board members here, as well as our board member-elect, Ms. Tony. This is our work session agenda today. We're going to open with finance and operations, and then we'll move to executive affairs. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chair Paulette Woods. Ms. Woods.
Good evening, board members. Today, we are going to be just starting off and kicking off our budget process. I know we're only halfway through, not even quite halfway through this year, but it's time to start planning for the 23-24 budget year. So we will have a presentation from Mr. Barnes, our acting finance officer, chief financial officer, to go over our revenue projections and to discuss any other points that he wants to bring to us. With that, I'll turn it over to our superintendent for her remarks.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. Good evening to everyone and welcome. Mr. Barnes stepped in as our acting CFO at a really busy time. And I'm just pleased to say that he's been doing an absolute marvelous job. He's been very diligent. He's been very focused. We really haven't missed a beat. He's made sure that all of our reports have been submitted on time. And I know that, he's worked very closely with our Madam Chairwoman on making sure that, all I's are dotted and all T's are crossed. But he's just doing a great job. And I just want to give a shout out to both him and his staff for the hard work that they have been engaged in.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot.
Okay. With that, I just wanted to also say I really appreciate the fact that given that we have a vacancy in our controller's position, a vacancy in our purchasing director, that we have someone who's standing in as our acting finance chief and 3 other positions. So he definitely deserves another hand.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent and Mrs. Woods, but we have a lot of good people in our finance departments as well, but thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly. Okay, Edmund, I'm here to talk about the 22-23 state aid revenues. Next slide, Edmund. All right, I wanted to just touch quickly on the state aid process. We received the final state budget in April of 2022. In May of 2022, we input those numbers into our proposed budget that's presented to the board. However, in September of 2022, we submit our SAMs and ST3 data. Those were 2 of the reports that were due during the period. The final state aid revenues for this current year, they are actually determined by the SAMs and ST3 submissions. So while we got a great indicator of what the state wants to give us, it actually depends on the SAMs and state aid submissions. One other note, we can and may revise the SAMs input for this year's revenues all the way through February of 2023. And this could incrementally change our final state aid numbers. Next slide, Edmund.
Ed here. Yes. Next slide. Yeah, it is.
So, we find just last week we got our current year 22-23 state aid revenues. This table just categorizes them into 5 different categories. And overall, it's just very good news, meaning we hit our budget numbers. I'll just give a couple of notes on this. The first column after the category, that's our actual state aid from last year in these categories. The next column is what we input into the 22-23 budget. The next column after that, that is actually what the state told us they're going to give us in each one of these categories based on our SAM submissions just last week. The two green columns compares what we're actually going to get versus what's in our budget and a percentage of variance. So if you go down to the bottom of the first green column, we're going to get $1.3 million or 0.15% more in state aid revenue than we have in our budget. The last two columns compare the actual revenues we're going to get this year versus what we got in the prior year. If you go down to the bottom of those columns, we'll get $49 million more, or 6.2% than we did in the prior year. A couple of notes. The 22-23 foundation aid numbers that you see in that first row, that includes the second year of a 3-year phase into the full foundation aid formula. And the second note I want to read is the 22-23 foundation aid included a CPI or inflation factor of 4.7%. That rate was frozen during the state's budget process. Now the CPI used for next year, it may be larger, but we won't know that until the governor releases their budget in January and the legislature finalizes the state budget in and around April. So good news, and I did review earlier on a more detailed basis some of the categories that are included in the row saying other formula aid. That's comprised of a variety of aids. We did overall, we did pretty good there too. And we have the opportunity to revise that negative variance up as we continue to scrub data, especially for special ed students through their IEPs. But overall, we had a very good state aid year. Andrea, next slide. Real quick, just to sort of wrap up the state aid process. With the adoption of the 21-22 state budget, the legislature and the governor committed to fully funding foundation aid by next year, 23-24. We're in the second year of that phasing. Previously, there was always a gap between the state aid, the foundation aid calculation, and what was actually paid to us. But certain school districts, including Buffalo, were required to outline the budgetary uses of these annual increases in foundation aid while it's being fully phased in. The foundation aid growth that's subject to this foundation aid plan is $34 million, as pointed out on the table on the previous page. So we need to tell the state what items is that going to cover in our budget. So we submitted to the state for 22-23 our foundation aid plan. It's going to cover mandated cost increases, largely related to the continued increase of charter school tuition expense. We're estimating using about $18.9 million of that foundation aid increase to cover that. And then secondly, contingency for labor contract settlements. To ensure funds were available to settle labor contract, BCSA, 409, PICTA, which were all successfully settled, and the BTF, the superintendent included an amount in the 22-23 general fund budget to settle these. So it was very forward-looking. We put in a contingency of $26.2 million for that. Our increase in foundation aid, $15.1 million of that, will be used to cover these contract settlements. So that wraps up the current year revenues and some notes on foundation aid. Admir, next slide. So some updates, and I know you're all looking for other information. Just some updates on what's next. Update on the finance department reorg. We are working toward rebuilding and improving the 11 departments that fall under the finance area. We've contracted for 7 Munis training sessions, 3 of which have already been completed. That's just to give the great employees in those departments the tools and training they need to do their job better. We're in the process of constructing procedure manuals for all 11 of those departments. This was something the superintendent insisted on, to never be left in the position we were again. In staffing, we are working with HR, making good progress on controller and maybe another deputy level position. It's too early to say, but we are working on that. And then for Mrs. Woods and the rest of the board, here's what's up next for us. You will get an ARP ESSER detailed update in January, a very detailed update. It's mandatory to give a presentation on the district's reserves. And then the 23-24 budget process is going to begin in January. It's like it just ended, but here we go again. You'll have a lot more, including the superintendent's kickoff memo, which he's already put together a draft of, and we'll be finalizing that and getting it out. Then the second quarter financial report is due in January. That'll really tell us the spending trends this year, and I'll have a better projected surplus or deficit at that time. Lastly, a 4-year plan needs to be updated. I did talk to the BPS. They want it updated, at least internally, but so much depends on the BTF contract and if there's going to be a settlement or not. They're okay holding that off until we have harder data to include in there. So that wraps up my presentation. If there's any questions.
Okay. Our state aid, our foundation aid, and some of the other aids, they're based upon student count.
That's correct.
And can you speak to what's going on with our student count? Because we've had presentations from our former CFO who had indicated that whereas in 2007 and 8 we had 34,000 students, we were down to 30,000 when we last did our budget. And that's a big problem for us because, again, state aid is based on students. And a number of those students are going to charter schools, which is a drain on our financial aid. So that basically is a double whammy. We have to pay more to charters, and we get less state aid if we keep losing students. So can you kind of speak to where we are in student count?
Sure. Yes, both of those trends have been outlined in numerous reports and budgets, including the current year budget. This year's beds counts, they're only initial, but they show a decrease of about 250 kids in our K through 12. So that's the current, most updated beds trend. In our charter schools, students, they could go up as many as 500 to 700 kids.
Does that include the new school that's is opening for 700 students each?
This includes every charter. Now, the charter schools, I got a caution, I gave you that number, but how it's actually determined, they submit invoices with student rosters every 2 months. We go through those with a fine-tooth comb. And charter student counts do drop throughout the year. So I'm giving you my estimate as of right now.
Okay. When you talk about charter schools, about February, isn't that when we see significant number of students being transferred out of the charter schools so they have a higher graduation rate and they can say, oh, so many of our kids graduated. But we wind up with more students and our student count increases in that time period, right?
Their student counts definitely decline. I don't have a number of how many come back to Buffalo, but a significant portion.
Okay. With that, Board members, I can't see hands, so can we just go alphabetically and you ask your whatever questions you have about our revenues to our finance chief? So that would start with Kathy Evans Brown.
I'm not in the first in the alphabetical order, but I will go. It's Sharon Belton Cotman. I don't have any questions. Good evening, everyone. I don't have any questions. Great presentation, Mr. Burns.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sharon, Board Member Cotman.
Belton Cotman, thank you.
Belton Cotman.
Thank you. So yes, I do have a couple of questions. What are we doing, or what are our plans to increase our student population?
So
We
I
don't
think
have to answer it now, if superintendent, if you can't, but it is a question that I think that needs to be answered.
Sure.
Particularly since we have a large number of adults occupying our buildings, and we are losing, charter schools are growing at our expense. So if you don't have an answer, it's okay, but I am going to be asking that question until we get a full understanding and an answer of it. Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. My next question is, we're at the point in the budget process, and every year, and I've been on this soapbox for a minute, every year we return millions and millions of dollars back to the general fund as a result of vacancies not being filled. And I feel that this year the board needs to do a couple of things, or the district needs to do, and the board may need to change some policies. But my concern is that if there are vacancies in schools, that children, and the budgets were set up, the principals put the money aside, and the children are not receiving the benefit of the dollars that principals are allowed to do. I guess it would be an out-of-budget request or something to try to get additional supports in their buildings. It's not fair that they have budgeted and there's not staff available to meet the needs. Now, personally, I feel that if the principals have budgeted, and I know one of my schools have upwards of about $350,000 in staff that they have not been able to fill, and have not been given the opportunity to get additional supports for the students, that money needs to remain and be returned back to that school for the following year. So it means that it would go in and it would have to come back out as it. I don't care, Paulette, whether you like it or not. I know what general principles are, but I also know what equity is. And equity says that if you're giving everyone a certain amount of money, and some schools are allowed to use up the money and other schools are not, that there needs to be some way or another that we make sure that those schools are made whole as a result of not providing resources to those children. And for someone whose schools in their district have a large amount of vacancies on a regular and continuous basis, because I don't have criteria schools in my district, I want to make sure that the children in my district and in other districts that are experiencing the same thing, I know that there are some situations on the west side similarly, that they get an opportunity to have some resources given back to them after you've put their money back in the general fund. And if that needs to be a policy or a resolution or a policy put in place, I think it's time now, if we're talking about equity, to make sure equity is happening. Because it's not happening the way it's going now. The teachers are allowed to pick the schools that they want to go to, the ones that they don't want to go to, or if there's a shortage, always there's a shortage in certain schools. So I'm going to be pushing this because I feel that it's very important that if you give a principal dollars, that they are allowed to use that money. And if they're not allowed to use it, then they should be able to use it the following year. And we need to make sure that happens. Thank you.
Madam Superintendent, did you want to respond to that at all?
No, I've heard that concern. At least last year, I know that I heard that concern. And I do believe that might be something that, we can look at as far as changing policy. It might require changing policy, because I think the past practice has not supported that way of spending dollars. So if that's something that the board is interested in doing, then we would move that forward. Once you look at creating the policy, if the board passes it, then the district will comply.
And Super, we'll have more discussions. And by the way, thank you for drafting so quickly that first kickoff memo. We can discuss this more, especially with Maria Wood, who heads up the school-based budget process, and we can kick around some ideas.
Okay, so I just want to be sure that I'm clear, though. So what I'm hearing is that if a school were looking to hire 4 reading teachers, and they posted, but, for whatever the reason, they could not fill those positions, that those FTEs could then be transferred into whether it's counselors, social workers, other areas of need that school has. Is that?
Yes, I think that's what equity looks like. Making sure that everyone gets an opportunity, especially if we're going to continue the same budgeting process. Because there was some conversation we were talking about changing the budget process for this year. So we're doing the school-based budget process where money is afforded to every school based on an allotment. And then these positions remain unfilled. That means children are not getting the resources that they need. And so, I don't know, I'm not professing to have the solution. I'm sure when Terry Schuler comes on, she'll have more to say about it because she's been in that situation. But I really think that we, in fairness to the students in each building, that the money is used for the benefit of them. And I'm not sure how that works out. That's something that you guys would, with the principals or whatever, but just think about it. We have schools every year that don't have their staff filled. So every year, millions of dollars. Last year, I think it was over 15 million that came back, to the general fund. Meanwhile, we have children that are not reading at certain levels, that are not achieving, and those are the schools that are struggling with staff. And so I just want to make sure that, we recognize that. Thank you.
I believe you
I
want to.
do. I have a comment on the same subject, which is why I thank my board members for letting me go ahead at this point. I think this is pointing to a larger issue in the budgeting process, in the way in which SBMT teams work and the way the budgeting process work. We have strictures in the ways that we budget, but we also have fluidity in the system. So we were already talking about the ways in which students move around within the district. They go out to other districts, they come back at certain times of the year. And I think what we're talking about here, in addition, rolling in the issue with staffing too, and the ways in which needs shift. If our basic principle is that we should budget in such a way that we are meeting the educational needs of students, maybe one of the things, as you're working through the procedure manuals, maybe a way to think about this is how do we build in a little more fluidity into the budget to meet some more just-in-time needs?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that'd be good to talk about during the budgeting process.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it.
Well, I thought what we had agreed was that principals that had a significant number of vacancies would talk to their ASLs and they would present to the superintendent that I'm lacking special ed teacher, math teacher, the hard to fill positions. And they would suggest and say, this is what I'd like in my budget to use those dollars for instead. And the superintendent has a contingency where she could put positions or either,
Now, Mrs. Luca, the superintendent is very attentive to that and has already approved and distributed out I think it's 3.2 million from a contingency. Very attentive to those needs.
So this year, we have not really had to decline any request, any of the requests that schools have. So whether it's what they initially put into the budget, or if they couldn't fill the position and submitted an unbudgeted request for something else, we've been able to approve that. And with security being one of our premium measures, a lot of what has come out of the contingency has been to support enhancing our safety and security in schools. But we haven't had to decline requests that have come to us.
Board Member Belton Cotman, does that seem to address some of what we had suggested would be the process, that the principals would be able to say, I have these unbudgeted positions, these are the things that, since I can't receive those, they request other positions, and it appears that whatever requests they've made to the superintendent, she has been amenable to filling.
So let's be real clear here. The principals don't know that that's an option, and it has not been conveyed by by staff to them. Okay, and so we're sitting here, which it seems to me it's a human resource issue. Once we define that we do not have the staff, that a letter or something goes out to, I don't know who, ASL or whomever, to the principals to say, what other options can we afford, buy for you or afford for you? My principals don't know that that's an option. Okay, so it's one thing. I'm sorry, Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll wait. I'm sorry.
No, it's one thing to have it available, but it's another thing to know that it's available, and that's my point. They don't know that it's available at this point. Had they known it was available, I'm sure they would have exercised it before December.
And I want to be really clear, because there's so much pots of money, and the superintendent has already approved so many unbudgeted requests. There's a couple issues intertwined in here. Using vacancy dollars for other spending, the policy has always been no overall. Do a better job at your budgeting up front. But the situations change and there's fluidity. So that policy technically still remains intact. It's really clear. The superintendent has approved $3.2 million in unbudgeted requests. What you're asking for is an extension and going even farther, Mrs. Coppin, and we will consider that, incorporate it into next year's budget if that's what the superintendent and the cabinet agrees to. So there are two issues here, but the fact remains, 3.2 million in unbudgeted requests.
Okay, let me explain something. Okay, because maybe I'm missing something here. Okay, when the principals request staff, and we are not able to give them the staff that they need, the money is being returned to the budget at the end of the year. That is not what equity looks like. And that's what I'm trying to get you to understand. There are some schools that do not suffer with this problem. But there are some schools that every year have the same problems. And we need to make sure that the resources are flowing accordingly. When we talk about the superintendent, I appreciate the work that she's doing. This is independent of that. This is saying that, do you understand that we're talking different things here? We are talking that the principal set up using the budget and came up with an idea of how many staff they should have to make their schools run. It's not happening because they don't have it. Okay, so how do we fix that? In addition to how do we find some staff that can fill the positions? That's a whole nother conversation. But there are some ideas out there for that too. I just want to be clear. No one is pointing at the superintendent that she's not doing her job. What I am saying is that it is unacceptable that for the past 11 and a half years that I've sat here, that money from as high as 15 million to 11 million, down to 11 million, I don't think it's ever been less, has always returned back to the budget for unfilled positions. And that's not how I feel that a budget should be working for children. So that's what I'm just trying to convey. So We're talking two different things, okay?
I agree, Mrs. Coppin. I agree with you 100%. I was trying to make the same distinction, just not as clearly as you were. They're two separate issues.
We have,
I just have,
I agree.
I have a clarifying question with this. So Ms. Cottman is pointing to well, actually probably three-strand issue. One is that we have a staffing shortage that needs to be addressed, and it might need to be addressed in more than one way. If we have a situation where we can't staff because we can't recruit teachers or whatever the job, whatever the position is that's going to be supporting our students, we may need to be able to have some flexibility to move some of that into another kind of programming that will then support students. Let's put that to one side. My question is about the idea of it being returned to the general fund. My question is, so if money is returned to the general fund because a staff position couldn't be filled, does that mean that those schools can't access it again in the same budget year? Or does it mean that then therefore they're automatically reduced in terms of what their staffing would be in the following budget year, which I think is the core of what Ms. Belton-Cotman is really concerned about. It's not so much about all of the other pieces of it. It's about that piece. Are they able to request again in that kind of situation? So for example, I'll give you a case. I'm a principal. I have 3 vacancies for teachers in core areas that need to happen. And so I make my request in the upcoming budget year. I know I'll be hiring. I go through the hiring process. It's August, it's September, I can't fill it. It's October, it's November, I still can't fill it. I'm still out to market, I'm still trying to fill it. Come January, at what point does that money go back into the general budget, or do I hold it for the rest of the year to continue to try and fill that position?
You hold it through the end of the year.
So it doesn't really get returned in that budget year.
No.
So then if I can't fill those 3 positions, I can't fill them, and we get back to the budgeting process. We're in January, we get the kickoff memo, I start working on my budget, and I say, you know what, I need those 3, and now I have an increase in population, so now I need 5. And this is why I need 5. I make my argument.
Right.
Will I still get those 3 plus the extra 2 if I make the case that I have the student population need?
Yes, the budget year that you're staffing for is incorporated in the school-based budget based upon enrollments, ELL counts, special ed counts, FERPA poverty counts.
So,
Yes,
so
don't
that,
lose anything.
so that would, and yet we're in a situation where principals are still trying to get resources. So that would point that there's a breakdown somewhere else, that there's something else we need to look at. And maybe that is the fluidity. Maybe that is the way in which students go through the special education process and therefore need more attention. There might be other causes embedded in this. Would that be a correct assumption? That it could be multiple reasons why it's not just the budget? It's not just that I don't have access to my money? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, that's okay. Don't be sorry. It was a little bit of an embedded question in there. So then I think this would be a good thing to have as a topic, as a work session, to understand what's the process, how do the SVMT teams work, how does the staffing work? You know, once we get the kickoff memo, I don't want to take over your work session, but may I make that suggestion for your consideration?
I think that's a wonderful suggestion.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But I still think what Mrs. Board Member Belton-Cotman is pointing out is that this year, an increased effort should be made to give the schools that have all of these vacancies some staffing in this year.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Because the year closes, the accounting system does close. And for this year, we will probably have another $14 million that's turned to the and put into as a part of the surplus. And then we reappropriate that. Now, that does not mean that those principals don't get those 3 positions funded next year. They do get them funded for next year. So that's, I don't think that's the complaint that Ms. Cotman is making. She's saying,
Let them carry that.
even though they still have those positions for next year, they lost use of those positions for an entire year. And the savings that we are receiving, the surplus we are receiving, is really based and more a burden to particular schools with highest vacancies. Now, I don't know, I know we can't change closing out the books, recognizing the surplus. But if there's a possibility of some putting in a process where we can say a certain percentage of that, they should automatically get increase in the next year because they suffered from that. Maybe that's something we can look into. But
Could I suggest though, as part of our budget process every year, we will outline the school-based budget process. And at that point in time, we can discuss these things further. But that's a typical meeting.
Start now, because once you're in it, you're in it.
Yep.
It's too late.
Right. Now's the time to have the
Right.
conversation.
Let me reflect on that. It was very frustrating to hear this conversation over and over again. For the past 3 years, board member Sharon Bell-Cotman brought this topic up, and we did a lot of research into it. And under the previous administration, we heard that we was going to have some improvement in this, and the frustration lies in what are we doing with the money? Why are we letting funding go back to the surplus? And how come we're not utilizing these tools more efficiently to help our children who need the help, and in the districts and the buildings that need the help? So I really think that we should take this to committee and see what can we do, immediately, and see what we can do this year to try to retain some of them funds and get some adequate help. We talk about helping with the school program. Our principals are deciding, and I understand what Mrs. Bell-Cotman said, because principals have told me themselves that, they don't have, they're trying to figure out if they're going to get an ELL teacher or try to get a music section in their school. And making those type of decisions. And I think we all voted on as a board that we was going to mandatory have a couple of positions filled in every school. And just let you know where we're at with that, as far as ELL teachers and ELA teachers, instructors, and also with music. So we said we wanted one sector that filled in every school, and see where we're at with that. And anything we can do to help make sure that this could come to light, that we can adopt our district to these goals. And we will certainly make sure that we can try to help the superintendent make this goal happen.
Yeah.
well, we've got about her.
Could I make a recommendation, and we are kicking off the budget process. I know the superintendent, myself, and some other members of cabinet will be getting together on some of these issues, as we always do prior to the kickoff of the school-based budget process. And we can report back to you on those conversations.
If we can have some type of checklist for each school that we can look at and the needs for those schools and see how they're being filled, per school, per district, I think that'll be a better way for us to take a look at it and understand what building needs what, and what district, where they lacking and where we can.
We were given a vacancy report that the staff took pains to break down by school.
85 pages, I believe.
Yeah, to make sure that everyone could discuss with their principals, these are your vacancies, how is it impacting you? And so that they could talk to their ASLs and make those.
But I don't believe last year the principals received that message that we received. That's what.
No, that was for this year.
Cotman was saying.
That is for this year.
That's why it's a multifactorial problem. So it's about staffing, it's about communication, it's about ensuring that the process is really clear.
And we do hear all of this, and we will be getting back to you as we discuss and incorporate some of these things into next year's school-based budget process.
Okay, great.
Excuse me, I need to say that I would like to see some of this conversation incorporated in this year's.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, I really
yes.
want. We know that we are coming off of COVID, and we know that we have great needs. Okay, in our student population. And I'm not sure what type of human resource requirements are done, but we need to really look at the data, and we need to make sure that these schools are getting what they need to be a success, because they're working. The principals are doing everything they can. The staff is doing everything they can. They're just working with a deficit, and we need to figure out how to improve it. And if that means that we have to start doing things like other districts are doing, where they use college professors to teach courses and train teachers. This is what we found out in Orlando is a practice that's going on across the country. We need to start talking about some creative ways to get our teachers trained so that our students can have what we need. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate the work that's being done, and I thank you for this presentation. Jennifer, your hand was up. Do you still have something to say? Paulette, you wouldn't have seen her hand up. It was up for a while.
Was I next to speak? I know we were going in order. I do.
So you would be next after Mr. Hurd. If you wanted
Mr.
to wait.
Hurd, Terrence, you're good, right?
If you want to go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, the only thing that I really wanted to add was, number one, I came in a little late to the presentation, but I was able to pick it up right away. And I believe that's because it was such a great presentation. So thank you very much for that. The numbers are right there and it was digestible. The only thing I want to speak to, because this is something that has been stated numerous times by myself as well, is just when we go through this and how we go about working with SBMT and whatnot moving forward. I don't know, I've almost been pacified in my conversations around creating some sort of PAR, some sort of directive, because I feel like there's a bottleneck between whatever the principals are bringing to the ASLs and the ASLs are bringing to the district. Now, moving into this new administration and how there's a much more, I believe, just by outside looking in, I believe there's a more cohesive communication. I believe there's real efforts that, to break down some barriers that were previously in place. But as a board member, it's frustrating to me, the autonomy when we are responsible for the fiduciary of what positions are not filled, where these vacancies are, where the direct communication with our constituents. And even though anytime we have been asking, I don't want to speak for the other board members, but for myself, if I need any reports or I have a question, I am responded to right away. But moving forward, I would like for us to see how we can make sure we put a standard in place where not every single decision is purely based on a principal's view. Like, we need to make sure that we are communicated when there's the vacancies before it goes through A, B, and C, because it is on us as the board members to approve the millions of dollars that it takes for us to take these positions and move them forward. So if you don't across the board, because I know the climate comes into play, I keep being pacified. Well, the school climate, I understand that. I'm saying a PAR. Elementary schools need to have this many teachers in place for this grade level. If we do not meet that, these are the resources that we need to make sure are in place before we go to the SBMT teams to say, okay, what else do you need? You will have your math, you will have this, you will have that. I feel like we are missing key positions and we're giving so much to reading teachers and all the attendance teachers, and all of that is necessary, but according to the school and what is happening in their climate. So I get that's where SBMT comes into play. But I really want for the district to move ahead in a way that this is the priority. We get from a lot of times, I'll get from parents that there are schools that don't have math teachers and substitutes are being in the math classes. And that falls on all of us as a whole. It really does. So if we can move forward with that conversation of what is the directive, the guideline, and exactly what these schools need, just as par for every school in New York State or whatever the guidelines are. And then the SBMT teams come in to see what else they need to accommodate their students and their climate. And if that's happening, I don't see that, so help me understand. That's all I'm asking for. Is I feel like there's a bottleneck in communication in the past. I'm hoping that if it has been addressed, but it's obvious at this point because this is a situation where most of my constituents have issues. Their students are not, there's a substitute that's been in the same class for how long? And it wasn't just because somebody had fallen ill or somebody was on maternity leave. It literally started in the beginning of school, and it wasn't fixed until, April of the next year. So my concern is that we set PARs. If we have to do it according to grade level, whether it's elementary school and then high school, however we do it, that would also help me be more confident in our code of conduct being implemented across the board. Though, we see it in some schools posted and taken a little more seriously than in other schools. It's these type of examples that I would like to see the code of conduct not be used only in disciplinary measures. And this is a whole nother conversation, but it ties into this with SBMT. Where do we put the directive in as a board, and to you, Dr. Williams, and you as making sure every principal knows that this has to be, and then you communicate whatever else you need with your dollars. I don't feel we have that baseline stat yet. So that's my only concern. And again, great presentation, Jim.
Thank you.
Well, one of the good things about having our new acting finance chief is when we brought that issue up several years ago about a standard baseline budget saying every school needed so much, a math teacher, so many reading teachers, art, music, and phys ed. Mr. Barnes was the champion on saying, yes, we could put together a budget presentation like that. And I think he's capable and willing of to take a look at that. Am I putting him on the spot?
No, the superintendent is on top of the budget process and knows that these issues need to be discussed for reasons of flexibility, a changing environment, and we'll be discussing and getting information out to you.
Thank you, Jen. Next would be, oh, you have a question? Okay, next would be Ms. Rivera.
I already made my comment. Thank you.
Okay, then that would be Mr. Scott. Board Member Scott?
It's Mr. Hurd, if we're going in alphabetical order. Go ahead, Mr. Hurd.
No? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hurd.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank Governor Kathy Hochul. She fought hard, so she can fully fund our foundation aid here in New York State. And we can see without having that gap this year, the foundation aid, we can see greater things in the future for us and our children and staff. So one question that came up earlier about growing the population. And I think that through the athletic chairman, was able to take a deeper dive into the athletic department and see some of the things, that can change that factor about kids coming back to the school. And it's already happening. We had a couple of kids come back from a couple of my senior league schools. They came here and made a great impact, especially with the Bennett Tiger football program. And we have others that's reaching out, that's been calling, to bring more kids here. So just taking the adaptation to that and looking at the modified sports program, which we're bringing in, and enhancing more and more each day as we prepare for our fall school year next year. We have coaches, that have kids from Buffalo Public Schools and charter schools, that, saying they kids and their teams want to come here to the Buffalo Public Schools. So we're looking at a number of kids that can be coming here in the next year or 2 years to the Buffalo schools to help support these programs, because we know that the athletic programs is kind of things that grow colleges and other high schools across the country. You know, they bring kids to those schools and those great athletic programs, you know, and kids find value, you know, in classwork all of a sudden. You know, now we find programs that help them study and be more mindset on enjoying school and being in class. So as long as we keep on that path, and with saying that, is there any way that if there's money that's going over back into the pot, how can we absorb some of the monies to help focus on programs like that is bringing children back to the schools?
That would all be part of, you know, the superintendent has a strategic plan, and all of that is incorporated into the budget, the financial plan for next year.
Yes, we have to very well support that and be ready for a number of children and families coming back here to the Buffalo Public Schools. So as we prepare at the numbers we're at now, we're looking for an increase, a great increase coming here. So we want to make sure that we're ready to sustain those, you know, a greater population of kids in the schools, and also have the resources and teachers there to help educate them also. One of my questions with this is equitable distribution of our funds, and what fully funded programs do we have from this new budget to support community programs within the district or other programs? You know, every month, you know, we are approving new programs for our students or new different supplies or things like that. How much of this fund is allocated directly towards fully funded programs?
I guess I would like to probably talk to you off and see specifically what you want, and I can give you the numbers from the budget. Okay.
I just want to look at the cost of our programs and see how we can allocate more money to bring in more community programs, more mental health and counseling factors going into the district. I visited a school today and a child was suspended for fighting, and it was asking him, why are you fighting? You know, and shoulders went up. I don't know. You know, the way somebody looked at the person or the child, you know, and we're going back and forth. So you know, we need these mental health programs. We need counseling. We need restorative justice on a larger scale here in the city of Buffalo. We need teachers trained in it. We need our community partners trained in it also, which we started working on it already. And if we could, you know, accomplish that more and get a better report, you know, from our schools and our principals, you know, how effective it is. I think that we can find a great path to where we can direct our funding. I'm going to the last thing I want to say is the monies that's projected for lower income students also. So I'd like to see something like that. Maybe we can discuss how the money is being traded for these our schools that have children with lower incomes and the needs for those facilities also.
Okay.
Chairwoman?
Mr. Scott would be next.
Mr. Barnes, do you have another presentation you're giving, or is this it?
No, this is it. It was on state aid revenues.
All right. So my question is simple, I think. Do you know currently the percentage of students that are attending Buffalo charter schools? I'm sorry, City of Buffalo students that are attending charter schools. Do you know what our current percentage is right now?
Well, I can get you the exact number tomorrow, but a quick one is we got 30,000 kids in Buffalo schools, K through 12. We got 10,000 in charters. That's 40,000. 10,000 divided by 25%.
Okay. Thank you. That's all. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Barnes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that everyone's had an opportunity to ask questions. We all agree Mr. Barnes' presentation has been fairly thorough. And with that, Madam Superintendent, I give you the final words.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Barnes, and thank you, board, for some rigorous questions. I've been taking copious notes, listening to all of your questions. So I anticipate that in the future, we will be having some presentations that will address some of the questions that were presented this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Okay, well, that concludes the Finance and Operations work session, and I turn it over to our Executive Affairs Vice President for the Executive Affairs.
We will take a 1-minute break while our presenter gets queued up and ready to go. We'll be with you shortly.
No, you always come first.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the next work session, which is the Executive Affairs work session. I'd like to welcome you to this work session where we will be receiving a negotiations update. And to open the session with my opening remarks before I pass it over to Dr. Williams, who will be ready in a minute. What I do want to say is, while as a board, we have certainly heard the BTF statement that half the teachers employed in the Buffalo Public Schools have no confidence in our ability to settling a fair contract. We, as the board, have confidence not only in the district's ability to negotiate a fair contract, we have confidence in our teachers. They're charged with the educational welfare of our students, and we are grateful to the work they do. And we are looking forward to continuing to work with the BTF, continuing to work on behalf of our teachers to settle and negotiate and then settle a fair contract. We have settled 10 out of 11 contracts already. We're looking forward to continuing productive negotiations to settle this 11th contract. And with that, I would like to open up where we're at in our negotiations. Mr. Kuzma, I pass it to you.
Or Dr. Williams, if she is.
Or Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Just to reiterate some of what you shared, as you know, our team has been engaged in a very rigorous but very genuine, honest, and focused negotiation process with our teacher union. And in most large districts, it is rare that the superintendent is a part of that negotiation team. But as a show of how much of a priority this is for our district, I have been a part of the team that has been negotiating. And so, as you shared, we've already settled 10 out of 11 contracts, 4 of which have happened since I was either interim or appointed as the permanent superintendent. And so tonight we'll share with you an update on where we are with things at this point. And you know, I do feel that we have made some progress, and you'll hear about that tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kuzma.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, Dr. Rivera, members of the board, and our community. You know, my pleasure to be here tonight to provide you with an update, you know, on the status of negotiations. I know that I was, you know, before you, I think it was at your October business meeting, you know, to provide you with a thorough update on the positions of the parties, you know, at that point in time. And, you know, I'm here to do that again tonight. You know, I've pared down the presentation a little bit. You know, Dr. Karestas has been on me. I got to stick to this hour, and we got to get this done in an hour. So we're gonna do our best to do that. But what I did do is send all the board members copies of our full proposal yesterday from November the 28th. As well as, you know, a copy of the Federation's November 7th, you know, most recent economic package proposal that it's submitted to us. So you have those, and in the event that you wish to discuss those, or you have some questions, you know, with me about those things or some ideas, you know, you all feel free to give me a call, and we can talk about those, you know, over the phone. You know, you know, it's as I've said before, you know, it's unorthodox in these negotiations to talk publicly, you know, about the positions of the parties, and you know, it's not ideal, but I think it can be productive if you know, and my intent here is not it's to present facts to you as to where things are and where we're going. You know, to be transparent with the public, you know, in an honest way about why we are where we are. You know, you know, we deeply appreciate and respect our teaching staff, as we do all of our labor and all of those represented by our collective bargaining units, and we've demonstrated that. And you know, I think what the superintendent was saying, this is important to us. It's important that we get this done. We're all on the same team. You know, we're stronger working together. You know, we're stronger trying to solve problems together. And you know, I don't really come at this. I'm a lawyer by trade. I do litigate, but this is not the posture that I bring to negotiations. It's one of collaboration, you know, talking through issues, talking through problems, and reaching an amicable solution. And you know, that's the spirit in which we approach this, you know, transparency, collaboration, and problem solving. Because, you know, as a board, as a superintendent, you know, as a cabinet, you know, and I respect the fact that our teachers union represents teachers, right? But we represent everybody. You know, you represent the teachers, you represent the students and families of the community, and those that don't send their kids to the Buffalo Public Schools, who have a vested interest in a strong public educational system within the city of Buffalo. And so you have to balance, and we have to balance all of those things as we approach this, you know. And so I wanted to open with that, and certainly now we will get into the presentation. Admir, next slide, please. You know, just an outline of our priorities. You know, we've been consistent and transparent about what our priorities are, and Dr. Williams, you know, has a strategic plan, and these priorities are aligned to her strategic plan. And, you know, it's to provide a fair and competitive compensation package to our teachers, and we want to do that and utilize the resources that we have, much of the resources we have available, you know, as soon as we possibly can. to get more money into our teachers' pockets. You know, we all are aware of inflation and what the economy at large is doing right now, and how that impacts folks on the ground. We all experience that in our personal lives, and these are conversations I've had over the course of the past year with the unions that we have successfully negotiated with. So we understand that, and we've taken that into account, you know, in the proposal that we've made. You know, we also want to stabilize the district's budget by bringing contract provisions in line with the marketplace. You know, it's not just salaries and compensation and what goes out, it's also other benefits that are provided to employees that come at an extraordinary cost. You know, health insurance for retirees and actives is 10%, if not, you know, of your budget every single year. So it's an appropriate thing, and this is the forum, negotiations is the forum in which you have those conversations, so that, you know, compensation, you want that to be in line with the marketplace, which we do, you know, recruit and retain teachers. We also want other compensation forms to be in line with the marketplace. Increasing the district's ability to appropriately fill athletic coaching appointments with the most qualified coach. You know, kudos to the Bennett Tigers, you know, and I'm proud to say that Coach Stevenson McDuffie is a Buffalo teacher. He's a perfect example of a great coach who's running a great program there. You know, unfortunately, you know, while there are many other examples of that, it is not consistent across the board because of the rigidity of, you know, some of the provisions within the contract. And, you know, we've talked about this in committees and ad nauseum, you know, over the course since I've been, you know, involved with this district, and it hasn't been solved, and it's a priority for us to solve it in a win-win type of way, you know, at the bargaining table, because that is ultimately where this type of work gets finalized and done. And so we are firm that we want this as a priority for us, and we want to discuss it. You know, negotiating work rule flexibility to increase the educational opportunity and learning time equity, you know, for all of our students. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with obviously that's pointing to the bell time issue. Next slide, please, Abner. So since my last presentation to you, you know, a couple significant things have happened. You know, we've requested fact finding, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but, you know, we understand that ultimately this is a contract that will be resolved at the bargaining table, and I'll talk about that in a little while as well. And the superintendent joined our team, you know, which is comprised of our finance folks. Jim has been at the table. We still have Jeff involved. He is not at the table. Tammy Holly McGee is at the table, and the superintendent, which is an uncommon thing, you know, to do. And you know, so we've met with the Federation since the last presentation, and despite the fact that we have requested fact finding about 4 or 5 times over the course of the last month and a half, and we've modified our offer, you know, moving and increasing our economic offer to the Federation. And so that would include, effective immediately, an 8% increase to teacher salaries, or 7 if we were to remove a step. Of course, compressing those steps is something we recognize we've got to start doing. It is a long salary table. It's been 27 steps for a really long time, you know, but we're trying to take a bite out of that elephant. And previously it was a 6% offer, you know, folks. So we've went up 2%, which is significant. And that would mean an immediate increase for teachers of $5,760, you know, on average, and that's using an average salary of $72,000, which is what our average salary is right now. Next July 1 of 2023, that's an additional 6%. With the option to have another step removed, and July 1, 2024, 4%. You know, so there's a total right now of 18% on the table. I have put in there what those raises would mean to the teachers. You've got $5,760 in the first year, $4,665 as of July 1 next year, and 3,297 in the final year. So we're front loading the raises, and the 8% takes into account the fact that the teachers have not had a contract for 3 years. That's why that's a big number. And it's bigger than would otherwise typically be discussed at the table. You usually see settlements somewhere between 2.5%, maybe 4% a year. Things obviously with inflation have gone up a little, or have trended upward a little bit, but it's an 8% is not a common number to see in the first year of a contract. This proposal would increase average teacher salaries from $72,000 to approximately $85,700 over the term, of the contract, which is a, significant increase in our average teacher salary, with the option to, compress 3 steps and bring that from really a 26-step salary schedule, because teachers start on step 2, to a 23-step salary schedule. And because of the retroactivity, issue, we have done as we have typically done in our negotiations, and what we've done with the, in the last BTF contract, which of course was a 13-year impasse, and that's offer a signing bonus, a one-time signing bonus. And ours right now, we increased it from 6% to 8%. Which would be, an average of $6,200 bonus to each teacher, and that would be based on 8% of their new salary after the 8% is implemented. So we've proposed giving them their 8% increase and then basing the 8% signing bonus on the new salary. Okay, so that are some changes that are made. And we have a bonus on the table for our part-time adult learning center teachers, and something for folks that have retired, between the expiration of the last contract and now, and that would be between $500 and $1,500, depending on when they retired. But, honestly, we do look forward-looking. We're trying to invest in the teachers that, are with us now and will be with us in the future. We want to retain them. We not only want to recruit, we want to retain the teachers that we have. This isn't a contract where we're trying to encourage people. As some contracts do, it encourages retirements, people to leave the system. That is not something that we're trying to accomplish, through this contract. We want to keep, the teachers that we have. Next slide, please, Agnes. Just briefly, I've been through this before. It's, in class instructors, providing them with a 30-minute preparation period, increases to our per pupil allowance, for teachers to get reimbursed for the supplies that they purchase on behalf of the students in their classroom. A stipend for folks that obtain their bilingual extension and utilize that when they're providing instruction to ELA instruction in the classroom. They would get a stipend, and additional stipends for some of our TOSAs. This is social workers, attendance teachers, and other folks that sort of work on the periphery, not maybe directly in the classroom, but work in some other way. Next slide, Admir. The district's proposal on some of the health insurance, we had previously proposed back in October that we would start with 13 and then it would become 14 in the next year and then 15. We have reduced that to a flat 13% amount. And of course, for retirees that, those that would retire in the future would continue to pay that same percentage in retirement, that they pay as active employees. This 13%, right now our teachers pay a flat dollar amount, which amounts to about 6-7%, of premium, which is, well below, the average. If you look at, other districts around, the average is probably about 15%, contribution rate. Rochester's 15%. Syracuse goes up to 27%, depending on how much a teacher earns. And other districts in the area are, in the range of 15%. So we're underneath where a lot of other districts are, but we do understand, that this is money out of a teacher's pocket. Granted, it's not, they will certainly make a lot more money under our proposal. They will be contributing more pre-tax dollars, towards their health insurance premium. And I show what that means to a teacher, down below what 13% means. It's an increase from $15 to $27.93 per year, or it's $139 a pay. You want to look at it that way. And for an individual plan, it would go from $600 to $1,257, and another $62 per pay. And health insurance is one of those things that increases every year, by 4 or 5%. And those increases are built in. We will say, admittedly, that during COVID, those costs did flatten out. And we didn't see an increase in our health insurance costs. We expect that to change again. And the reason is because COVID is over. And during COVID, a lot of folk couldn't go to the doctor. They couldn't go, you couldn't go in person. You couldn't go to your specialist. A lot of that stuff was shut down, and the entire, healthcare system was focused on dealing with the pandemic and not these other issues, which is why we've seen those numbers flatten out. And on top of that, our other units, all of our other units that receive health insurance as actives have agreed to contribute more. And so that actually is underwriting, and keeping our costs stable. But we don't expect that trend to continue, well into the future. And certainly, as inflation impacts folks, prices are going up in that area, in the healthcare area as well. Next slide. Other proposals on health insurance are going to, moving to a Medicare Advantage plan at age 65 for those that are eligible for retiree health insurance. Right now, our teachers are the only group that aren't required to go on Medicare Advantage. Every other one of our units has agreed that that's mandatory upon reaching age 65. And right now in the teacher contract, it's voluntary, and we've had success, with teachers moving over because it's a very good plan of benefits. It's really known as a silver sneakers plan, right? People love those free gym memberships that they can get, and it's still, don't be mistaken, it does reap the district a savings of some dollars because we use Medicare dollars differently when they're on a Medicare Advantage plan, but it's a Cadillac health insurance plan. And it's a very good one. We're also proposing, as of July 1 of 2023, that, new hires are not eligible for the retiree health care benefit. All existing members within the unit right now would continue to be eligible under the terms of the old contract or of the current contract. So we're not trying, we're looking 25, 30 years down the road with this, trying to plan ahead, and also, as we consider boosting our wages significantly, for our groups, that, this is an area in which, we can't have both of these gems. We can't have the highest paid teachers in the region and, retiree healthcare. That's not sustainable, from a budgetary standpoint. And we have to consider those things, as we're planning to have this district succeed well into the future. Next slide, please, Amir. Other proposals you'll see in the district's proposal is, discussing the transfer process, and how that works. And that plays into a lot of what, Ms. Cottman's talking about with vacancies and movement, and what you see is a lot of teachers transfer, they gravitate to the criteria-based schools. Those positions are filled very easily, but it leaves vacancies, around the district and elsewhere. And we've got to have a reasonable and meaningful conversation. One, to bring this process into the 21st century, but also take those types of things into consideration. I think the BTF has been open to having a conversation about that. Implementation of the athletic coach MOU that I know Ms. McCosey, you'll remember that everybody, including the coaches, worked very hard on to get to a point where we were ready to present that to our respective constituencies. It was a good product, that came out of the collaborative type of work that I'm talking about. And we know what happened with that, so we're willing to have conversation and be open-minded about, things that we can change with that document, but we think and we believe it's a good model to incorporate into our collective bargaining agreement. Flexibility in determining the starting and the ending times at schools to support the decreased learning loss and enhance safety of all of our children during the bus driver shortage. And this has been on the table from the beginning, and we have, as a district, in collaboration with First Student, this board has focused on transportation and this bus driver shortage ad nauseum, and we've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at it to try to solve it. But we know that there is still a problem, that has impacted our ability to run after school programming, to get students to and from athletic contests and the like. And it is one that we believe we can fully solve, by going to a new bell time model. And, I think we put a proposal together. Was it perfect? It wasn't perfect, but what we got back was just a no vote, as opposed to a counter offer or response that would be productive, and allow us to develop a product, that would work not only for our students, but also work for, our teachers, because we do understand that there would be, some disruption in some lives and schedules that would be changed. And so, we're open-minded to be collaborative about that, but it is a priority. We won't be pulling this off the table. It's not going to go away, and the transportation crisis is not expected to go away. So we're fully committed to solving, this problem at the table, and we'll continue to try to discuss it, until we can come up with a product that works for everybody. Hiring of teachers during the summer. Right now they're hired based on their summer seniority, which the district does not keep records for. But we do have district level seniority, and so we want to make that change. And then also, there's been a lot of talk about, extending the school year from 42 weeks to 43 weeks. I want to be clear. We have a 43-week calendar. We have always had a 43-week calendar in this district. Teachers work 43 weeks. And the reason for that is if we didn't, we would not have the midwinter break, which would be an unpopular thing. We would have to cut that out to have a 42-week calendar. We come up every year, because the BTF contract requires it, a 42-week calendar and a 43-week calendar. Teachers every year unanimously, or not unanimously, but they overwhelmingly approve the 43-week calendar. So we're not asking them to work more than they already do. It's just having the flexibility, standardizing what we already do into the existing agreement. Next slide, please, Admir. Now, in terms of the BTS proposals, we primarily focused on a couple of them, as I explained last time, which we have the accurate data, to cost out. And the last time, there has been movement that's been made by the Federation in terms of what they have proposed from an economic standpoint. If you'll look back at the PowerPoint presentation from a few months ago, you would see something different. Every year would have been a 10% with with every year having the COLA next to it, and they had different steps that they were removing. You know, their step proposal here is more expensive than their previous one, you know, but overall, they have made movement and their proposal has gotten less expensive. And that, I'm not saying that it's still not extraordinarily expensive. We'll get to that in a second, but it's 8% every year. You know, with COLA, which I have the percentages next to that at what COLA we're anticipating it's going to be based on projections, and what the removal of each step means. The removal of each of step one every year is a 3% increase to all teachers in that year across the board. And so that, I want to be clear about what that is. And then in bold next to each year, you'll see the total percentage being asked for in each year by the Federation. And the total now is 96.5%, you know, over the term of the collective bargaining agreement. When I presented back in October, that number was 112.5%. You know, these increases would be retroactive and they would apply to everything. Salary schedules, coaching rates, psychologist salaries, and I'll get into the cost of what this is in a moment. But you can see 96.5, that would double, you know, that's going to double your teacher compensation, you know, almost immediately upon signing, but certainly, you know, even further as this contract goes on because of the cumulative effect of it. Next slide, Admir. And the other proposal that we've been able to cost out is the hourly rate for teachers, which, you know, is currently $31.85 an hour. The BPF is proposing that be $1,100 of their salary, you know, which would increase their hourly rate retroactively by 102%, or up to $63 immediately upon signing of the agreement. So that would be fully retroactive, and it would double, you know, their pay. Not only would this be a nightmare to figure out, it's also an extremely expensive, you know, proposition that's being put forth by the Federation. Next slide, please, Admir. So just in terms of the district's two proposals, the one that I had discussed with you all back in October, compared to the one that I provided from November the 28th to show the movement that we've made. You know, in the first year, you know, back in October, we were at 37 million just upon signing in the first year. Right now, we're at $54 million, you know, which is well above the you know, the amount that Jim was talking about earlier that had been set aside for the settlement of this contract. So we would need to use, you know, some of our reserves to pay for the contract. But you can see there, it's a, you know, $17 million increase in year one, you know, into teachers' pockets. The 4-year net cost has increased from 181 million to 210 million. And our run rate, those are your carry forward costs every year, increased from 53 to 60 million. Next slide, please, Admir. Now, showing the history of the BTS proposals, we've really received 3 different economic proposals from them this year. On January 9th of 2022, on May the 6th of 2022, which is what I updated you on last time, and on November the 7th, which was just about a month ago. And, you know, the total costs of those have certainly decreased from 2.379 billion to 1.892 billion, which was the most recent one. You know, this would require, and we'll get into this on the next slide, you know, significant outlays immediately upon signing of the contract, which in this case, the most recent proposal, it would be, you need $551 million, you know, in your bank account upon signing to pay for this contract. and we'll get into that in a second. We don't have that, to pay for it. And your carry forward costs, your run rate is $554 million under this proposal. So you pay right now, board, you pay about $260 million in base teacher salaries every year. That means by the end of this contract, you would need $550 million on top of that, to be able to afford this contract. 554 million more. And this folks, and I know I've said $2 billion recently publicly. We've only costed out 3 proposals. There are 87 on the table. So it more or less is much more significant than that. And I want to be clear about another thing. This isn't the first time that I'm saying this, right? Like, this isn't the first time that the BTF is hearing this. Before I ever go public with a number, this is exchanged behind closed doors. And most recently, a week and a half ago, we came in and asked, the Federation had said to the superintendent, we're going to get you our cost out sheets. We're working on that. We'll have that for you next time. So last time we asked, do you have your cost out sheets? Because you said you would be bringing that to the table. We've done that work, but we want to make sure that we're on the same page here. And the Federation indicated they didn't have that. They didn't know the cost. And that NYSET was going to be working on it. So we provided the Federation with, and in every one of these circumstances, we provided the Federation with a detailed analysis of how we came to our figures. And we said, if you have any disagreement with this, if you can have your financial person talk to Jim, talk to Jeff, we'll arrange that phone call. And in fact, we have arranged those phone calls. And there is no dispute about the costs of what we're talking about here. And we've been transparent with the Federation at the table about how we're costing it out and what it means before we ever have these conversations. And so this is not a surprise. It's not a sneak attack. It's being transparent about things that have already been shared. Because as I said before, we want to have an honest, transparent dialogue at the table about really what we can do. And, so I wanted to make that point clear to everybody that all of this information and all of this document, all these numbers have been shared across the table. Next slide, Abner. So, as I've, also said, we right now are in a sound financial condition. Kudos to Jim and his team, in our finance department. I know we have a lot of issues to discuss on how we fund certain things, but all in all, we do a really good job of budgeting and balancing our budget and having money so that we can run an effective school district here in Buffalo. And that's something that I think the board should be very proud of. We've been responsible. We'll continue to be responsible. Right now, we have $313 million in our fund balance. Our proposal uses about 67% of that within 4 years of this contract. And so, we would consider that, to be a significant investment into our compensation package for our teachers. We consider $210 million or 67% of our savings account, to be a significant and a meaningful investment. It's not something that I stand up here tonight and am ashamed of, and nor should you be, in any way. This is a significant investment, into our teaching corps, which they deserve, and we're happy to do, but I am in no way ashamed of it. The BTF's 3 proposals would fully deplete all of those reserves immediately upon the signing of the agreement, and it would require nearly double our available fund balance to pay for the BTS proposed raises, and would likely cause, this is not a threat, this is reality. It would cause this board to have to make some really, really difficult decisions about the number of staff that we have and what services we're able to offer to our students. It would, including layoffs, and it would cause significant harm, to us as a district and our ability to provide, a sound education to, the children and the families that we serve. It would immediately render, if we were to agree to this, it would immediately render the district insolvent and unable to operate, if we were to agree to what the BTF is proposing. And that is the primary reason why, we are where we are. We're billions of dollars apart, and it would be, I said the other day, it would be, as a public official, it would be the most irresponsible thing that I or the superintendent or Jim Barnes could ever do would be to agree to this and to put it before you to even consider. We have to be more responsible, than that. And I would hope that, I know our teaching partners and the members of the BTF or the BTF leadership, are there to represent the teachers, but I hope they would appreciate the fact that we can't, do something like this that would cause such devastation to, the system that we all hold so near and dear to our hearts. Next slide, Admir. So in terms of next steps, we're sort of doing two things at the same time here. But we have a fact finder that's been appointed by PERB. We have submitted all of our arguments and all of our documents to the fact finder. And the fact finder has some clarifying questions, which we are going to meet next week on December the 13th, where he's going to seek clarification on a few outstanding items. And then sometime thereafter, I'm estimating, 30 to 60 days, maybe sooner, maybe later, but I would think sometime in that time frame, we will receive a non-binding report, from the fact finder. And we requested fact finding because it was clear to us that we were not making headway. We were significantly far apart on the money, and we asked for this because we're hopeful, and optimistic that the fact finder will bring the parties closer together and ultimately help us, move this process forward and reach an agreement for our teachers, which is that's why the district asked for it. And so we're ready to go on the 13th. That's next week, Tuesday. And we will eagerly await what the fact finder has to say thereafter. But we also remain willing to negotiate, a fair and meaningful process, willing to negotiate in a fair and meaningful process, which will prove to be respectful to teachers and who are deeply appreciated, while financially allowing the district to operate in ways, financially, which will continue to offer the programming and professional development that will encourage high and equitable academic achievement for all of our students in our schools. And so we are scheduled to meet with the Federation tomorrow. I've been asked, well, why are you meeting when you have fact finding, coming up next week? And, it's because, one, we want an agreement. We'd like to get it done tomorrow if we could. Two, the fact finder's report is non-binding. And so ultimately, there is no end to this, colleagues, if we don't reach an agreement. There's no entity, there's no person, there's no special master, there's no government body, including the board the state legislature, anybody that can come in and impose an agreement on the parties. It's different. Police and fire, they, like, for example, have binding arbitration, where if they get to a certain point, they can go to an arbitrator, and an arbitrator can impose wage increases. That recently happened with the Buffalo Police Department. That cannot, and it cannot legally happen here. So what that means is that this ultimately is still going to have to be settled at the table, right? So the work has to continue, the effort has to continue. And, I know the superintendent and we've talked a lot about this. Our team has talked a lot about this, and we are going to continue, to responsibly make best efforts, to try to get there. Just like we have with every single one of our other units. We are gonna continue to work hard. We're gonna continue to stay open-minded, and also to be firm in the commitment that we owe to our students, our families, and our community, to address the priorities that we have. This can't be a one-way street. As the superintendent eloquently says, but it's very simple. Negotiations is some give and it's some take. And I feel over the last couple of months, we've been doing a lot of giving. There's been no effort on the other side to say, we understand we've got to talk about bell times and athletics and health insurance, and this is our ideas on those things, to share across the table. There has not been any of that, and that in addition to the $2 billion is the other obstacle right now that we're facing, and I hope that changes. So with that, I close. I thank you for your ears tonight, for listening to me, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead, and if we can take the slides down, I'd like to turn to my fellow board members virtually first, and then we'll go around the table in the boardroom. So I'd like to start with Board Member Belton Cotman, if she has questions or comments for us.
Thank you, Nate, for the presentation, and I really don't have any questions, Madam Chair. I thought the presentation was very detailed and very clear, and I appreciate it. I guess the only concern I have is how do we share this information? Because I was approached on Sunday by a teacher, and she didn't really have a clue, and she said that she sits at the bargaining table. So if this information is out there, and I think we need to share it, and we did that one time before, and I really hope that tomorrow you guys are able to come to a solution, because I remember the last time we went through this process. I can almost call it, if I was a betting woman, I would bet it I was going to play, and I think I'd be a millionaire at the end of it. So I really hope tomorrow there's a new day, and thank you for all you're doing, Nate and Superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do want to also just let everyone know, to that point, this presentation is available via our agenda on our website under the Buffalo Board of Education. It's under Board Docs. It is freely accessible to the public, and we welcome folks to come and look at what we have. Ms. McCosey, do you have a question or a comment for us?
I don't have any questions. I very similar to Board Member Belton Cotman. I just, this is, we're all contacted. We're all being talked to about this. We need this kind of clarity. So, and the fact that we had to go public with it, it is what it is. But I'd like talking points and bullets. I really encourage people to look at and Interim President Rivera is saying to make sure you look at this for yourselves, interpret it however, but this is, you know, tomorrow I'm really hoping that we can get somewhere. And I really appreciate, just on a personal note, I really appreciate the MOU for the athletics being a part of this in a real way. That was in less than a 2-year period of time. We were able to bring the BTF and the district together in such a major way around such important work that stresses, especially when we see how our students and our athletes are being treated outside of our city. We would have been, in a great position to be able to fight back against some of the things that have been said and done with our district. And I encourage whatever powers that be to please put this in effect. Study tables for our students who aren't able to maybe meet that benchmarks play, coaches who are willing to go above and beyond, parents and community was engaged in the whole process, the rubrics in order to make sure that everybody has met quality standards in coaching. Just because you coach softball in the seventh, or you played softball in the 7th grade, doesn't mean you should be coaching it at a high school level. So these are all points that were really agreed upon, and we're talking years ago. So I appreciate that being a part of it. That's my soapbox. But thank you for the presentation, Nate, and I appreciate you, Dr. Williams, for sitting at that table, knowing that's not, typically how things work. But people need to realize, not just in this instance, but across the board, it's a new day. Buffalo Public Schools are taking things to another level in a real way. And if we got to break some barriers down, if we got to break some silos, if we got to change how we operate, this is what we're going to do. So again, thank you, Dr. Williams, for being at that table and being transparent.
Thank you, Board Member Mikosi. Dr. Evans-Brown, do you have questions or comments for us?
I don't have any questions for me. Thank you for that robust presentation. It was clear, as Sharon Belton Cotman mentioned. I just can't even imagine that this is not having an impact on our children and their learning. We have to move on. And like Jen said, this is a new day. We know our teachers are critical to this district. We also know that if it wasn't for kids, none of us would have a job. And so we have to negotiate contracts so we can move on. The pandemic is over, and this district is moving in the right direction, and in many levels. On many levels, we found that out Sunday in Syracuse when Bennett High School took the gold home. So that's my 2 cents. I agree that for those who are in the dark and really don't know, need to look at this presentation that Mr. Kuzma done tonight. It was very thorough, and know for yourself what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans-Brown. Mr. Scott, do you have questions or comments for us?
I do. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Mr. Kuzma, I have several questions, and answer them as you feel comfortably answering publicly. So first, you mentioned Rochester and Syracuse and the healthcare. Do they pay for their retiree healthcare in Rochester and Syracuse?
Syracuse, they do not. Rochester, I still believe, provides retiree health insurance.
Okay. And do you
they
know?
Contribute,
go ahead. And
they contribute toward that. In Rochester, is 15%.
For retiree healthcare?
Yeah.
Do you know offhand if any other Western New York school districts pay retiree healthcare insurance?
I do not believe so. They supplement it in some way. Usually, teachers, when they retire in the suburbs can utilize their accrued sick time, or if there's an early retirement incentive that's available, they can use those monies to offset the cost of health insurance until it runs out. But once it does, and, in most instances, the teacher would then be, on their own. Of course, knowing that you do get, Medicare at a certain point, in your life, and the government will pick it up. But no, the retiree health insurance in Western New York, I do not believe there are other districts providing it.
Is it, well, let me ask you this. The information on slides 8 and 11, have those been shared? Has that information been shared directly with the Federation?
Well, 8 is the Federation's proposal, so they gave that to us. And 11 is, the cost, yes. As I said, all of the numbers that are on page 11 have been shared with the Federation, and almost within a month after they've given their proposal. So we will cost it out, and we will come back and share the figures with them in a more detailed format than even we put on here. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
And they dispute, though, what you've put together as far as your breakdown?
No, I mean, never at the table. It wasn't until yesterday that I was accused of being dishonest about what the number actually was. That was the first I'd heard that. There has been no information or documentation or financial statement brought by the Federation indicating what their proposal costed. And in fact, Dr. Williams can verify this for me. We asked, on November 28th, if the Federation, because they said they would bring their cost out information to us, and we asked them for it at the beginning of the meeting because we said, we have ours. We want to make sure we're on the same page with this stuff. And it was indicated at that point, we haven't costed it out. We don't have that information for you.
And with other units, Dr. Rivera kicked off talking about how we've negotiated successfully with 10 of our other collective bargaining units. Is there this discrepancy in the cost, the proposals that are being made? Is there a where you don't understand, you don't have numbers on what your proposals are, and you're challenging the district's analysis of what the proposals cost?
No, we don't have that discrepancy. I mean, we'll see. There are 2 points. One, no. Usually we're on the same page with the other group in terms of what it costs. We have an understanding of that, at the table. I think what's uncommon here is that we're 3.5 years into this thing, right? And, usually you'll see from a bargaining unit them make pretty high proposals to start, right? Shoot for the moon, and kind of bargain down from there. What's very uncommon here is that we're 3.5 years into this thing. We've been through mediation with a mediator on a dozen occasions. We're in fact finding, and we're still we're still $1.8 billion apart. To have that kind of a gap this far into negotiations is extremely uncommon, especially when both parties seem to be indicating that they want to get a deal done, right?
Yes. 2 more questions. So the vote of no confidence, we knew that was coming, or that it was being used as a threat. Typically, when somebody makes a threat, they're requesting for something to happen. Was it clear what needed to happen for that vote of no confidence not to occur?
No, other than the statement that they were expecting some quote unquote substantial progress. It was funny, a month ago, I think it was October 25th, when we made an initial, They said we made substantial progress, and then a month later that it changed and we didn't make substantial progress. But that's all that was sort of put forward, was that there was an expectation of some substantial progress.
So it wasn't give us the, I think, what, 95% increase, what now is 1.85 billion increase. It wasn't stated specifically like that, or we're going to do a vote of no confidence.
That's correct.
It was vague. And so a second vote of no confidence is being threatened. And do we know yet what the ask is to avoid that second vote of no confidence?
No.
Okay. My last question has to do with the bell times. So it sounded like this was a proposal, and there potentially is some flexibility. When you say, is there flexibility in some of those start and end times?
Well, potentially, I would have to, talk with Cheryl Kennedy and David Hills, to get their thoughts on that. We haven't really gotten to that point yet, but I will say generally we're open-minded about all of it. As long as we do have some management flexibility to make some change to address, the transportation crisis. I think that the times, we'll have to look at that.
And I requested today, I just want to request it now in the meeting because this is a hot issue right now that we're all hearing about, especially from parents right now, worried about some drastic change happening, which I don't foresee happening at this time of the year. But can we receive hard data on if these three bell times were to be enacted, how many bus drivers would be freed up, how it would, in tangible terms, reinstate our after-school programming to the way that it was pre-pandemic, and how it would also restore the transportation for extracurriculars and sports, etc. Because we're hearing that, this would drastically improve drop-off, pick-up for school, after-school programming, extracurriculars, and sports. But can we have real numbers on what that would look like if this was enacted tomorrow?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we may have shared that before. I will, and that's accessible, so I'll talk to David and Cheryl and get that information out to the board.
Okay. That's all from me, Dr. Rivera. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd, I turn to you in the boardroom.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Rivera. I just have a couple of questions, but a couple of things I'm very unpleased with. We know that this negotiation has been going on for 3.5 years now, and I'm very displeased with the emphasis being on the superintendent, Dr. Tandra Williams, and with the vote of no confidence at this time. I know that she worked very hard to close off the other contracts, and her and our legal team. Mr. Kuzma worked day and night to rectify those contracts and make both parties happy and satisfied. And I just think that to put that emphasis on the superintendent at this time, even though she doesn't have to be at the table, but she is taking the time to be at the table and work. I think that we deserve to give a little more time and adjustment to try to find a way to rectify this contract, a way to for both sides to get together, be at the table, and try to find what we way off right now. And we really taking great efforts through arbitration that'll be coming up, and also with the fact finding. So I think that we should really work together on that purpose, and from the district standpoint and with the union standpoint, and let's see what magic we can make happen, over the next couple of weeks or months, and try to close this gap. Another thing I'm not happy with is the bail times situation. I know that we talked about possibly pursuing a pilot program, but I don't think the bail time should be tied in to the contract or at the table in any sort of way. What's most important right now is our children. And if we can stagger bell times at least some of our schools and have a safe passage for our children coming to school and going home, I don't think that should be tied into the contract. That's something we should be able to sit down separately and work on. And also the coaching MOU. That has a huge impact on our children and their collegiate opportunities in the future. And each day that we don't settle that part of the contract, that MOU stipend, stipends for teachers and coaching and get that stuff settled, it takes away from our children. It takes away from our athletic programs. It takes away from children in our class seats. And that's something that I believe should be separated from it. I remember a year ago we talked about, under the previous superintendent, was the possibility of having layoffs. To this point, there have been any layoffs. We've been working hard trying to hire teachers and bring more structural measures here into the district. We spend millions of dollars bringing more equipment and apps here into the district and other programs to help with our children, especially our ELL students and children with special needs. We really should be moving towards better prospects for our children. But as adults, we really have to sit down and sit the table and earn this out. There's Fortune 500 companies that go through contract negotiations on a constant basis, and they never get tied into the base that we get tied into here in education, and what's most important is for our children. I'm also concerned about the teachers' morale. I hear a lot of teachers, and I get calls from teachers a lot about what's going on with the contract. They hear one-sided point of views. I'm glad to be able to share two sides of the points of the construction of this contract, and I'm happy that we're able to bring it up to the public also. But I'm concerned about the teacher morale in our buildings, the attitudes of the teacher, because when a teacher comes into a classroom upset, it goes on into the students, and the students might not feel comfortable, or students might not feel the tendency to put on more work. So what we wanted, so I really like to speak more with our teachers, talk with our teachers more, and settle that down so that they can know that we got both parties working hard, to rectify this contract. And I know we mentioned Bennett a little bit earlier, and I'm gonna keep on mentioning Bennett. 95% of their children graduated last year. Great program, and we could use that as a pilot, of the rest of our district of what can happen when both sides work together, when we got a strong superintendent, strong administrative staff, strong teaching groups that love the kids and love coming to work, even though we're going through adversity, but to try to pull things together and work together. That's my message, and I feel that we can diligently, put together the plans to work. So if you want to comment on anything, or
Yes.
Yeah, respectfully, Mr. Hurd, just in regard to your first point about, separating out issues from the contract negotiations, right?
Yes.
And we sort of tried that, with the last contract that we settled with athletics primarily. We agreed to form a committee, to do the work, of discussing a variety of different topics around athletics. And, they focused on the hiring process, and came up with a product. We're now 4 years later without that having crossed the finish line, right? And so we have to be cognizant of, it is the appropriate place to discuss it at the bargaining table. Mm-hmm. And if it's separated out, especially if you don't get it done before the contract is settled, you have to think, well, maybe I'm going to be waiting again until the next contract comes around to discuss it again. And so we have to be careful about that, because I want to get it done for this board, for our students, and the bargaining table is the appropriate place to do it. We've sort of tried the committee approach, and it didn't get done. And I know there's been a lot of folks that have been involved and had those and were promised we'll get it done, but it just hasn't. Okay, so I just want to be careful about, saying we're going to take certain things out. I don't think that's what the whole board wants right now. And we can talk about that, perhaps at another time in executive session where we are on sort of the strategy around those things.
I don't want to, I ain't gonna go too far into it.
Yeah.
But I can say, I know that the union did create a new teachers athletic committee that's supposed to meet on behalf of the MOU. and to try to find some resolution in it.
Yeah.
So with that being done, if the union could make an effort to say, okay, we want to work on an aspect of it, that's why I feel comfortable that we can separate this. This is our case of suffering.
Yeah.
And with we being so far off in the contract right now, I just,
Yeah, and if
it's
we,
heartening that this could be tied up.
hey,
with
look,
that.
you have my commitment, and we can get, I want to get the contract done soon, but if we can get the athletics done before that, then I'm all for it. I'm all
Thank you.
for it, okay? But
Thank you.
until there's movement on that, or we have a document to be signed, I'm going to keep it in the negotiations as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hurd. Ms. Woods, any questions or comments before I offer mine?
Our superintendent gave a commitment for transparency and communication and cooperation. And I want to commend our superintendent for going above and beyond, sitting at the negotiation table. You can't get any stronger commitment, transparency, cooperation than to go there yourself and be part of the team. I think our teachers respect that. When I look at the vote that was cast, it appears that about half of the teachers did not bother to vote. That says to me there's a silent majority that respects your effort and your communication. I would like this proposal to be emailed or sent to every district employee, because I'm getting the same feedback from a lot of teachers that no, they were not aware that we are offering 8% immediately a raise, 6% the next year, 4% the next year, and on top of that, an 8% signing bonus. No, the teachers are not aware. You were talking about giving them a 25%, 26% increase in their salary. No, they are not aware. I think they need to know that. I've never heard of anybody giving 25% increase in the salary in an offer and not having it respected. That said, we only have a $313 million surplus. That's our piggy bank. That's all we got. I've never heard of anybody being willing to give up $210 million, 67% of everything you got, to give it to the teachers to say, we need you, we respect you, and we're trying very hard to show you that we're willing to give you a salary that respects your efforts. That said, we can't give what we don't have. Mr. Barnes gave our presentation on our state aid. The legislature is giving us $34 million increase in foundation aid. That's 30 more. That's not $500 million. There is no way that this impasse, which appears to be, is respectful to the teachers, respectful to the district, or respectful to the students. I really believe that in the 4 months that our superintendent has been here, she's bent over backwards to respect everyone. This board has bent over backwards to make it clear to our teachers, we respect you. I think they are actually hearing us. I think they need to know about this proposal. More transparency, communication, hopefully will yield some cooperation. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. So I'd like to add my comments to what my fellow board members have said with a few core messages here. The first is that, again, we have a shared concern for the educational welfare of our students. and that we are really committed to investing significantly in our teacher corps because it's important to recruit and retain our teachers to support our students. And we are committed to ongoing productive negotiations. And we look forward to doing that more. And I think that's very clear in our presentation. I think that's very clear in the tenor of the comments from our board members. So with that, I'd like to allow Dr. Williams to make a comment, and then I'll move to Ms. Belton-Conlon.
No, not to me. Jennifer, was your hand up?
My apologies, I didn't see a hand.
Well, not a hand, but I thought she had said she wanted to speak. I wasn't sure.
It's not for this.
Okay.
The board be prepared for an email.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mikosi. I appreciate that. Dr. Williams, I'd like to turn it to you for your comments.
Sure, thank you. And thank you to the board for all of your supportive comments. It is really appreciated. I've been in schools this week and I'm getting lots of support from teachers. I met with our principals and explained to them that certainly the vote of no confidence, it's disappointing and it's very unfortunate, but I remain focused on the work. We have been negotiating now. I've been a member of the team for a few months and I have a newfound respect for what happens at that table. Our chief counsel, Nate Kuzma, who really kind of leads that effort, and Tammy Holly McGee, who sits on that team, and Jim Barnes, operate each time I've been there with integrity. They listen. Afterwards, we reflect. Before we go in, we plan. We're prepared. I have a newfound respect for the art of negotiating. And I agree with Mr. Kuzma when he says there is nothing that anyone on this board should feel ashamed about that is included in the contract. I know that I certainly do not at all. And so I'm able to, wherever I am, walk with my head held high. The fact that they've already come out and said that there is a pending second vote of no confidence. I mean, if you have no confidence, I don't know where you go deeper than that. What is it? No confidence or more no confidence? I don't know what it is, but I'm going to stay focused on the work and making sure that our children have the best education every day that they come into our schools that we can offer. I care about our teachers. I do believe our teachers deserve a fair and equitable wage. I'm all about that. But as you heard from the presentation, if we were to give what is being proposed, it would be the most irresponsible. I could not walk into any place with my head held high. I could not. They would make more than principal. They'd make more than cabinet members. And, I just think that, it's a difficult time. I really am hopeful that when we meet tomorrow, that things go well. I know that I'm certainly coming with an open mind, open ears, a willingness, and I know that the team will also. So I'm just hoping that the BTF will do the same.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. The board appreciates that. So with that, I'd like to close the work session for tonight, and thank you for your kind attention. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.
And thank you, Terry, for staying on and listening. God bless you.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Oh, this
Welcome
one was,
to the party.
yeah, this one was a pretty good one, Terry. We were nice.
That's good.
Are they done? It smells like they're done.